He blinked when he read the paper. His signature, in ink so permanent it could have been carved into stone, stared back at him. And her, his mother, she paled for the first time in a year. The woman who had claimed my husband, our home, and even our wedding as her stage, now held an eviction notice signed by her own son. My hands didn't shake when I slid it across the table. I never intended to raise my voice. I just learned how to rise. I should start at the beginning, but beginnings are deceitful. Love makes them glow, smooths the jagged edges. If you had asked me on our wedding day, I would have told you I had found my anchor in him. He kissed me with promises. He whispered of our future. But the first crack came before our first night as husband and wife. He handed me a brass key, too cold, too small. The guest room. He didn't meet my eyes when he said it. Mom says the master bedroom is hers. I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. The months that followed stripped me piece by piece. She chose my dress, cut the guest list until my own cousins vanished from it. At the reception, she stood where I should have stood, smiling at strangers who congratulated her. "You raised such a fine son," they said. Not one word about me. I wasn't allowed to hang a photo on the walls. She said frames left marks. I wasn't allowed to cook in her kitchen. She said the smell lingered. I wasn't allowed to speak at family dinners. She said my opinions were too loud. And him, my husband, he lowered his eyes every time. He said nothing, did nothing. And with each silence, I felt myself erased. But erasure leaves traces. A woman like me doesn't vanish quietly. I watched. I listened. I learned. It was at one of her dinners that I first caught it. The way his father's eyes lingered on me, not with lust, but with pity, a softness. He alone saw me swallowed whole at his table. He alone poured me an extra glass of wine when she forgot. That night, while they argued in the kitchen about something trivial, salt or perhaps power, I sat with him. He asked me if I was happy. I didn't lie. I told him the truth. He listened. From then on, I played their game with a steady hand. I laughed when she mocked me, as though her words were harmless. I nodded when my husband obeyed her, as though I was blind. I moved through that house like a shadow, unnoticed, underestimated. But in silence, I prepared. I studied property law. I traced deeds and contracts. That house she called hers, it wasn't. It belonged to her husband, and every asset tied to it was his alone. She had power only because everyone allowed her to wield it. But paper could cut sharper than any blade. I planted seeds, careful and patient. I encouraged my father-in-law to take back control of his finances. "For your health," I said gently, sliding pamphlets about estate planning across the table. He trusted me more each day, because I was the only one who treated him like a man, not a relic. Meanwhile, I kept my husband close enough to believe I was loyal, but distant enough that he never saw the truth forming. He thought my silence was surrender. It was strategy. And then came the day. A year after the key to the guest room. A year after my wedding dress became a costume she had chosen. A year after I was buried under her rules. We sat at the table. She presided at the head, as always, with my husband at her right and his father quiet on the left. I slipped the folded papers from my bag. Smooth, deliberate, I slid them forward. She opened them, expecting another bill or letter she could dismiss. But her name, bold and black, was stamped across the page. Eviction, 30 days. "What is this?" her voice cracked. I looked at her husband. Calm, steady, he nodded. I signed it. She turned to my husband, searching for rescue. He froze. His own signature, in ink he barely remembered placing, sealed her fate. The day he signed the refinancing forms I had guided him through, too distracted to read the fine print, he had handed me the weapon I needed. The silence at that table was cathedral heavy. She stood, trembling, spitting words too broken to land. You can't. This is my house." "No," I said quietly. "It never was." She looked at me then, truly looked, and for the first time she saw me. Not the girl she could belittle, not the shadow in the guest room, but the woman who had outplayed her in her own home. That night, I didn't sleep in the guest room. I didn't sleep at all. I stood by the window, watching the lights of the house flicker, thinking of every insult, every humiliation, every time my husband's silence cut deeper than her words. I thought I'd feel rage. Instead, I felt clarity. I hadn't screamed, I hadn't begged, I hadn't broken. I had risen, steady and deliberate, until she fell. She left within the month. The house breathed differently after she was gone. Lighter, freer, mine. My husband tried.